Greetings, book lovers, and welcome to Author-ized. Today's guest is Hala Alyan. Ms. Alyan is an award-winning Palestinian-American poet and clinical psychologist whose work has appeared in numerous journals, including the Missouri Review, Prairie Schooner, and the Colorado Review. She resides in Brooklyn with her husband. Her debut novel, Salt Houses, was published in May 2017, and it has received some pretty great pre-publication reviews. And so without further ado, let's welcome Hala Alyan to Author-ized. Welcome, Hala.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Before we begin, I want to read two of those reviews for Salt Houses. Okay. This from Library Journal. This timely historical does for Palestinians what Khaled Hosseini did for the people of Afghanistan, by placing readers inside the hearts and minds of one Arab family scattered from Boston to Paris to Lebanon. She beautifully illustrates the resilience of the human spirit. And one more, this one, ooh la la. This is from Bustle. 15 new authors you are going to be obsessed with this year. Salt Houses illuminates the heartache and permanent unsettledness experienced by refugees all over the world, reminding readers of the burdens and the blessings of home. Congrats on those reviews, Hala. They're pretty great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So my first question is about your career. You're a poet, a novelist now, and a clinical psychologist. Are you still in practice?
I am. I'm in my office this very second.
So when do you find time to write?
So my policy is 30 minutes a day. So if I can write for 30 minutes a day, then I'm good. And whether that's going to be fiction or poetry, it kind of depends on the day, depends on what I'm working on. But whether I'm doing it during my lunch break or on the subway, I try to make time to write for half an hour every day.
Wow. You know, it doesn't sound like a lot, right? 30 minutes.
And I think that's why I've been able to remain faithful to that way of doing it, because it's not super overwhelming. It's not that much time, but I've learned that if you do it, for me at least, I'll speak for myself, if I do it consistently, then I can actually be quite productive, and you can write a lot more than you think you can in 30 days.
You know, it's a lesson. It's a lesson for a lot of people who say, oh, I have no time to write. I can't get up any earlier. I can't stay up any later. I just have no time. But if people are honest with themselves, everybody could probably find 30 minutes.
I think so. And a lot of it depends on, everything's going to be there's going to be some sort of compromise or some sort of sacrifice. So for years, during my internships and postdoc and whatever, it would just be my lunch break. So instead of taking that hour to go out or to walk around or to hang out with colleagues or something like that, I would just stay in my office and I would write for at least half an hour. And so yes, it cost me something, but then I also was able to write a book that way.
So how would you say your career and your education in clinical psychology informs the characters you write about?
I think I'm one of those extremely lucky, very fortunate people who found a career that really complements the artist's life. And so yes, it's time consuming and it takes a lot of work, obviously, to do clinical therapy, but I think my education and my training taught me to pay attention, to be observant, to be patient. It taught me to think about things like people's motivations and desires and fears, and all of that I think goes really well when it comes to character development for fiction. So when you're thinking about why a character, I'm always asking myself, why would the character do the next thing? I don't just write plot for the sake of plot, but it kind of has to make sense for me on a psychological level that, well, this would be the motivation.
Yeah. So who are Alia and Salma? They're your two female protagonists in Salt Houses. Tell us a little bit about them.
Sure. So Salma's a mother living in post-48 Palestine who is raising her daughter and son in this really politically tense, politically charged time. She has sent her eldest daughter away to get married and sent that daughter to get married and move to Kuwait as a way of trying to keep her from this sort of politically tense environment. she's sort of doing the best she can. She's, she's a mother who's like in really unfortunate circumstances. The book opens with her right before her youngest daughter Alia's wedding, and she's sort of thinking of ways to keep Alia safe, especially because her daughter is quite rebellious, as is her son. And so she's essentially a single mother, like half a century ago, because her husband died soon after the occupation started.
Wow.
And then Alia is this sort of, she's this rebellious firecracker of a woman who marries for love at a time when people are often marrying for companionship, or the elders are sort of deciding who people marry. And she falls in love with this man named Atif. And because of this political circumstances and context in which they are all living, they soon find themselves having to emigrate to Kuwait and start over there. And she's extremely unhappy there, but she loves her husband. I mean, she never leaves him for that reason.
I am reading a novel right now that is set in America, alternating between 1942 and 1986, World War II period, when Japanese Americans, many of them third generation, were placed in internment camps. Right. They lost all their belongings, they lost their homes, they lost everything, and that's here in America. It seems to me home is a really important theme of your novel. Yeah. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've grown up as a member of the Palestinian diaspora, obviously born to immigrants. And we also moved around a lot when I was growing up, so we kept moving around between the Middle East and the United States. So for me, there was this constant search for belonging. Even as a very young child, I remember thinking about things like houses, and would I get to live in the same house for an extended period of time? Would I get to have the same bedroom for an extended period of time? There was just so much upheaval, and I think amidst that, I from a young age have been concerned with issues of belonging, home, returning to places that we feel like belong to us but may no longer. And I think the book is really, it's sort of a look at this idea of what it means and how, for a lot of the characters and for this family in particular, it ends up kind of being, home is sort of within each other, right? They find home within their partners, they find home within their parents, their elders, their children, and each of them kind of grapple with it in different ways.
So I love the cover. I think the cover is beautiful. Is there significance to the cover?
It was the illustrator. It was all Houghton Mifflin. They did an amazing job. They put it all together. I think they wanted to sort of tie in with this theme of earth and gardening, because several of the characters love gardening. And also the idea of you can technically grow the same things in different soils. So I think that's also something important when you think about integration and diaspora.
Yeah. So I guess it is your first novel, and a lot of people say people's first novels are always a bit biographical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have the kind of family where none of the characters could be based on anyone because they would freak out. They would never let that happen. But I would definitely say I took structural issues from my own family's history. So, for instance, my parents met and married in Kuwait. When I was 4, Saddam invaded and we had to leave Kuwait. My parents sought asylum in the United States. I watched, on my father's side, he's one of many. So I watched cousins that remained in Kuwait have a very different life than cousins that moved to Wichita versus cousins that moved to Amman. So I've always been kind of interested in that idea of how oftentimes these random choices that people make by luck that then completely change the history of the generations to come. So in that sense, definitely, I borrowed the idea of diaspora and where the people end up, but alas, I could not base my characters on more of my family, although I would have loved to, because my family is a bunch of characters and it would have been kind of amazing.
So besides the theme of home, family is another integral theme in the novel, and over multiple generations, there are these crises, terrible, terrible crises. The Six-Day War in 1967 and the invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein in 1990. Were the wars the inspiration? Did you think about what the wars did to people?
Absolutely. I mean, I think they had to be, right? So if I was going to write, I mean, you can't write about that region or, you know, people living in that region without writing about those conflicts, because they did upend people's lives. They did completely uproot people. It was just a reality. So even if I had wanted to write a book about a Palestinian family that ignored the political backdrop, it just would have been a lie. But I think, I mean, I mentioned this idea of people being made refugees more than once, several times over in the same lifespan. And so you see that, for example, with the Palestinians, Palestinians in camps in Syria, when then now Syria has this, horrible conflict going on. And so this idea of a lot of Palestinians left Palestine for countries like Kuwait, only to find themselves sort of in the midst of another war several decades later, and then having to leave again. So I would say the wars definitely were an inspiration. I don't think you can talk about the Arab world without talking about them, unfortunately.
Yeah. This is a really scary question, but I'm going to throw it out there.
Yeah.
Do you think anything like that could ever happen in America?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that, the nations in the Middle East are very young ones, which I think people forget. They were established, and they were also established by colonial powers. So lines were drawn kind of arbitrarily, and borders were drawn sort of arbitrarily, which has led to conflict, and then conflicts spill over from country to country. I don't know that something like that could happen in the States. I mean, I don't know. I think we're all we're in a little bit of a new era, and I don't know what the next few years will look like, but I do think things are run very differently here.
Mm-hmm. So who are some of your favorite authors? Who has inspired you?
Yeah, I love Jhumpa Lahiri, Amy Tan. I am a huge fan of, I think just in general, immigrant stories from a very young age. I was very much drawn to them and found myself really pulled to those sort of tales, unsurprisingly. I think my favorite book in the world is probably Interpreter of Maladies.
Yeah.
So
I love The Namesake, too. I thought...
Oh, God. I mean, so Unaccustomed Earth is really good, too. It was just Interpreter of Maladies was something else. It was amazing.
By Jhumpa Lahiri, in case the audience doesn't know. I thought she was so spot on with her depiction of family life and stuff. And I confess, I did not get an advance copy of your book, so I can't wait to read it. I'm very much looking forward to it. But I agree, Amy Tan also, fabulous.
Yeah.
It's such a gift to English language literature to have those stories for future generations. Do you have a favorite fictional character?
I really I was always very fascinated when I was younger with Anna Karenina and sort of her tragedy and the way that she made these really destructive choices, but very human choices. Like I remember reading it for the first time. I was way too young to read it. I was like 11 the first time I read it, and then returned to it after a few years and kind of understood it a little bit better. But I remember she was always a character where I was like, why are you doing what you're doing? But also I completely understand why you're doing what you're doing, and it makes you so human. And I would say her probably.
What are you working on now?
I'm working on, so I like to do several, more than one project at the same time. So I'm working on finishing up a manuscript for a new collection of poetry and adding a couple of more short stories to an existing collection of short stories. And I'm a couple of 100 pages into my new novel, tentatively titled The Arsonist City, but we will find out.
A couple of 100 pages. Wow.
Yeah, I read
That's
a lot. I mean, I'm also one of those people that when it comes to editing, it's a matter of like cutting down like Salt Houses was many chapters longer than it is right now. So I'm trying to get better at being concise.
so is there anything else you'd like your readers to know about you, Hala?
I really fell in love with the family in Salt Houses. It was an honest to God a joy to write it. It started as a short story, and I found myself so intrigued and so fascinated by the character's mother and the character's sister, and I wanted to know what happened next. And it was, I don't know how other people write fiction, but for me it's always been a process of kind of being like, I wonder what the characters are going to do next. So it's as much of a surprise to me as it is to anyone else when I'm like, oh, they're going to do this, or oh, this person's going to fall in love with that person, oh, this person's going to leave their family or whatever. Just that it's a joy, and it also is sort of surreal to be in the midst of. I mean, I still can't process the fact that my book is coming out.
Now, at the end of every interview, I ask the authors to talk a little bit about a particular passage in the novel. So why don't you think about a passage that was really profound and meaningful for you that you would like to share, that you think conveys much of the tone of the book to our viewers?
Sure. Okay, without giving away too many spoilers. Okay, so I think one section that captures kind of the heart of the book would be in the second to last chapter, or is it third to last? Sorry, it's in the final Atif section. So at that point, he's a great grandfather, and his wife isn't well, and he goes outside to his garden in his home in Amman in Jordan, and he's sort of sitting in the absolute dark, pulling out flowers that his wife loves because he feels like there's no way to return to what they had together. And I always feel like that scene is very poignant because he starts to reflect on all the things that were lost decades and decades ago, and he's thinking back to how long ago when he had to leave Palestine after the 6-Day War, and reflecting all the different houses they've all had to live in, reflecting on the different cities his children have been bred in and raised their own children in. And then you see the grandchildren coming out. So at that point, his grandchildren coming out and just sort of asking him if he's ready to come inside yet.
It sounds lovely. You can learn more about Hala Alyan by visiting her website at halaalyan.com. Thank you, Hala, for joining us today, and thank you all for watching. Check back soon for more inspiring authors talking about their inspiring books. Thank you, Hala.